All right, let's jump to love-hate pass catches as we take a look at the rankings 1 through 10. No surprise, the top two, Puka Nacua, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. But George Pickens, who's been wide receiver 2 in the NFL this year, at least in terms of receiving yards, he comes in at number 6, Matthew. Neck and neck, really, with CeeDee Lamb this year. They have almost identical receiving props. What do you think of his matchup against the Lions?
Yeah, I love the matchup against the Lions, right? Detroit plays man coverage at basically the second highest rate. Literally only one team in the NFL plays more man coverage than the Detroit Lions. Why do I bring this up? Because no wide receiver has more receiving yards against man coverage this year than George Pickens. He's actually 112 receiving yards more than the next guy. He just absolutely dominates man coverage. Detroit plays it at a very high rate. And here's the other thing. CeeDee Lamb coming back hasn't hurt George Pickens at all. Since CeeDee Lamb came back, my guy Ates, I call him Ates, my friend Ates. Since Ates came back, George Pickens is the 7th best wide receiver in fantasy football. He has a 28% target share during that time frame. So, again, we've talked about it. I think you want as much of this game as possible. Obviously, everyone is starting Pickens that has him, but I do think there's the potential here for a blow-up game from George Pickens.
Yep, absolutely. We'll talk more about George Pickens in our final segment. I will add Nico Collins to the love list. Favorable matchup against Kansas City, whose pass defense has really struggled in recent weeks. They just don't have the pass rush that they had in years past. They're not nearly as effective blitzing as they have been in previous years. And I think, Lawrence, the main thing is that he just looks like Nico Collins again.
Yep.
In recent weeks, he got the rushing touchdown against the Colts, goes 5 for 98, had the huge game against the Jags a month ago where he went 7 for 136 with the 15 targets. Had the huge game against the Titans too, where he had that 3rd and long conversion towards the end of the game to effectively seal it before the walk-off field goal. So Nico Collins, it's been an up and down year. It was a really disappointing start, but he pretty much looks like Nico Collins now.
Yeah, look, 20-plus fantasy points in 3 out of his last 4 games. I actually think the one you see at Week 13 versus the Colts, that's closer to his floor, and that's what you want out of your top receiver in fantasy.
Absolutely. All right, Matthew, let's jump to Jameson Williams, who he could be the guy for tonight with Detroit with their season on the line. Amon-Ra St. Brown listed questionable. We'll see if he gives it a go or not, but it should be a relatively favorable matchup against the Cowboys secondary.
Yeah, wide receivers that have seen at least 7 targets against Dallas this year are averaging 24 fantasy points per game. Every single one of them, literally every single wide receiver that got at least 7 targets against the Cowboys this year has scored at least 14 fantasy points. And then you sit here and look at what Jameson Williams, shot at Jameson is the headline there. Nice job there. Last week, 37% target share, not a typo, 37%, 10 targets, 10 receptions to 144. They're just dialing up play after play for Jameson Williams, especially when Amon-Ra St. Brown left that game very early. I expect more of the same this week, tonight, I should say. Williams was targeted on 33% of his routes. I mean, this Goff was just looking for him all the time. And so even if Amon-Ra is out there, we don't expect him to play tonight, but even if he's out there, maybe he's out there as a decoy. I think Williams will be the first read for Goff tonight in what should be a high-scoring game. I kind of want to just mention there that if you're desperate and Amon-Ra St. Brown does not, in fact, play, Isaac Tesla, is how you say it, it becomes kind of an interesting punt play if you're sort of in a 3-team, 12 receiver, that plays 3 receivers league and you're kind of desperate. I think Isaac Tesla is sort of interesting tonight.
I will be starting him in the League of Assholes if Amon-Ra St. Brown does not play. He will be in not the flex spot, that Thursday wide receiver 1 spot. Isaac Tesla, score again for me, dog. Help a brother out.
Yeah, between Isaac Tesla and Marcus Mariota, it's been a tough year for open-ended vowels at the end of names. No good at all. What do you think, Lawrence, about Jameson Williams' potential against Dallas, which is, you don't think of the Cowboys like this, but with Quinton Williams is such a good run defender, and he changes the total complexion of that run defense that the Cowboys might become a bit of a pass funnel now.
Yeah. So I think that if the Cowboys are not able to get pressure on Jared Goff, then it could be a big day for him and Jameson Williams. That's the whole key with the Lions. You got to get linemen around. You got to get defensive linemen around Jared Goff, get him around his legs, get him all jittery in the pocket. But last week, I think we saw why Jameson Williams was drafted where he was drafted, right, early in the first round there. And they completely just, it's like in 2 seconds, he turned into one of the top receivers in the league, and he was carrying the offense basically. Wasn't a great day for Jahmyr Gibbs. Their offense was going through Jameson Williams, and you should expect that tonight if Amon-Ra St. Brown can't go.
Yep, should be a good game as well, Lawrence, for Dalton Kincaid if he's healthy against the Bengals. Very well chronicled how dominant tight ends have been in that matchup.
Yeah, got him going against the Bengals. But just quickly, speaking of the Bengals, I meant to say Chase Brown, how he ran against the Ravens earlier, not Kyle Manunga and DeAndre Swift. Yeah, I couldn't let that go. I couldn't let that slide.
I was going to let it go.
I couldn't do it. But Dalton Kincaid, this is the thing. He's hurt, but he had a limited practice yesterday. And, man, if he could go, this is about the best matchup you can get as a tight end. The Bengals have allowed 122 receiving yards per game over their last 4 games to tight ends. Look, they let Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews go for 95 and 47 yards respectively. So clearly, obviously, they allowed the most fantasy points per game to tight ends. I even think if Dalton Kincaid does not play, if you're looking for a streaming option, I would say look towards Dawson Knox's way. But if it's Dalton Kincaid, which we hope it is, it's all wheels up for him versus the Bengals, especially when the over-under is 53.5.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, another tight end, Matthew. Tyler Warren has had a couple of rough weeks in a row. Didn't do much against the Chiefs. Did very little against the Texans. Very difficult matchup, and Warren was dealing with an illness going into that one. But before the bye, he had that awesome game in Berlin against the Falcons where he effectively won it at the end. What do you think of his prospects against the Jags?
Obviously, I like him a lot. As you see it there on your screen, he's my number 3 tight end this week. He's playing the Jaguars. Jacksonville's allowed the second most receptions per game to opposing tight ends. Dalton Schultz, Travis Kelce, Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, all of them scored at least 16 fantasy points against Jacksonville. Warren gets a lot of targets. It hasn't always produced fantasy points recently, but 3 of the last 4 games, he's gotten at least 7 targets. Given the matchup with Jacksonville and how important this game is to your Colts, Jay, I believe Tyler Warren does it for the shoe, he does it for you, and he does it for fantasy managers this Sunday.
Very scared about this game.
I'm shaking my head. I'm shaking my head. Yes, I could do that now. We getting there. Yeah.
Troubling game. Just win the game, Colts.
Yeah.
Just 1.5-point favorites now.
The Jags did just whoop the Chargers a couple weeks ago.
Wait, when was the last time the Colts beat the Chargers? I'm sorry, when was the last time the Colts beat Jacksonville in Jacksonville? It's been years.
I don't know, but all I know is that they lost in the final week of 2021 as 17-point favorites, and it cost me an ungodly amount of money. I will still never forgive Carson Wentz for that performance down in Jacksonville. Some fantasy managers, Matthew, won't forgive Michael Wilson for his performance last week. Disappointing, but he headlines others receiving votes on the love list.
Yeah, we're assuming Marvin Harrison Jr. is out. And if he is out, Michael Wilson has gotten a 32% target share in games that MHJ has missed. Rams have allowed 17 fantasy points or more to wide receiver in 3 of the past 4. How about Jacoby Myers, who randomly is the 13th best wide receiver in fantasy football over the last 3 weeks? Colts have allowed at least 90 receiving yards to a wide receiver in 3 straight games. Sauce Gardner not expected to go. I did not expect to talk about Adonai Mitchell in week 14 of this season, but here we are. Since joining the Jets, Mitchell has actually gotten a 30% target share. Obviously, Garrett Wilson being out helps a lot of that, but their passing game has stabilized a little bit with Tyrod Taylor. Mitchell's gotten an end zone target in all 3 games. He's been a member of the Jets. He has already caught him, but he is getting the targets. And obviously, the breakout game last week as well. Hopefully, that gives confidence to both himself and Tyrod against the Miami defense that allows the 7th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Finally, I'll mention Devon Bailey. You saw him there on your screen. 91% route participation over the last 3 weeks. And it's a good matchup against Tampa Bay, who gives up the 2nd most receiving yards per game to opposing wide receivers.
Okay, Matthew, the chat is chiming in saying that 2014 was the last time that the Colts won in Jacksonville. Unverified, but Jay Woogie66 seems like a reliable source there, so we'll go with 2014. Question from Born Under a Bad Sign. Half-point PPR flex, Matthew, Michael Wilson, Debo, Neal, Vidal, or Jake Ferguson?
All right, I'm assuming I'm assuming Marvin Harrison Jr. is not going, and so if MHJ is out, the answer here is Michael Wilson. If Michael Wilson can't go, Devin Neal maybe. I mean, Ferguson tonight. I think the upside of Michael Wilson is worth benching Ferguson tonight, right? You're going to have to make that decision before we know. So I would do that. So now it's Neal and Vidal. If Amari and Hampton isn't activated this week, then the answer is Kamani Vidal. But if Amari and Hampton is active, and we just don't know how that split is, I'll say Devin Neal would be my answer there. So a lot of caveats. It sort of depends on how it all sort of shakes out. I want to mention two tight ends that made others receiving votes real quickly, Jay. But Kyle Pitts, Lawrence, your man, Kyle Pitts, your best friend, Kyle Pitts, since week 7, actually is fifth in the NFL among tight ends in target share. He's been getting a big target share, especially with Kirk Cousins under center, Drake London being out the last couple of weeks. But it's a nice matchup with Seattle. We don't often say that, but this is actually a nice matchup against Seattle, as Seattle allows the 3rd most receiving yards per game to opposing tight ends. And finally, Brenton Strange. Parker Washington's banged up. Colts allow the 4th most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. Very quietly, Brenton Strange has double-digit fantasy points in every full game that he's played this year.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.